contacting me and asking, oh, I want to
Yes,
immigrate to
me too.
Saskatchewan, right? Can you help me get a relative in Saskatchewan? So, well, unfortunately, right, I cannot help you to procure a relative in Saskatchewan.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited to be here today with one of my friends that I met not too long ago. Today, actually, we are talking about coming to Canada. So, not coming to America, but coming to Canada. Immigrating to Canada, because a lot of people has asked me to talk about that. So, with me to chat about this is an immigration consultant, David Akimolua. He is the principal immigration consultant at Crest Immigration Services in Edmonton here in Alberta. He has a background in economics and is a master's degree holder in quantitative finance. David, welcome to my show. How are you?
Hi, IJ. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I want to start by talking about your degree. Like, seriously, quantitative finance. Like, isn't finance already quantitative? So, how is this different than a regular financial degree? I have to ask.
Well,
I want to know.
it's still finance, Well, finance has different aspects, right? So some aspects of finance are more quantitative than others. So, I mean, this is essentially saying that, it's mathematical finance, applications of mathematics, and have a degree in finance without doing a lot of mathematics, but this particular degree focuses on the applications of mathematics, in different areas of finance.
I did not think that you could do anything in finance that did not involve math. Like, I didn't think there was any area in finance that isn't a lot of computation and calculation. So thank you for explaining that. And even my head is hurting just thinking about the amount of math that you'd have had to do in this master's program. Like, my head is exploding.
Well, every academic program has its own challenges, right? So, I mean, it's just one of those, right? So,
yeah, you're on a different level, though. You're on another level. But David, I'm so happy to have you here once again. Thank you for giving me your time today. This is a topic that is hot topic, I think, any day, anywhere, anytime. Everybody wants to come to Canada, and there's always questions around it. And of course, with COVID, things have changed a little bit. So I wanted to chat with an expert about this, and let's get into the conversation right away. So tell us, what are the main streams of coming into Canada, and possibly which one is easiest to come to Canada?
Yeah, so thanks once again for having me. Yeah, this is a question that I get almost every now and then, from many people across, different parts of the world. They want to immigrate to Canada, and they want to know what are the different pathways for them that can bring them to Canada, and which one is the easiest, right? So what I say is there's really no direct answer to that question. So it all depends, right, on your profile.
That sounded like an economist. It all depends.
Well,
economist
is all about assumptions, right?
Yeah.
So it all depends on your profile as an applicant, right? An individual applicant. So all applicants don't have exactly the same profile. So usually when people contact me and ask me such questions, I like to kind of have a better understanding of their profile. When I say profile, I mean things like your educational qualifications, your work experience, your age, your language proficiency, and things like that, or some other things we call adaptability. Do you have family members or relatives in Canada? Or in some cases, right, for some provinces, do you have a friend who lives in a particular province, or, something like that. So it depends largely on what your profile is as an individual applicant. So once we understand your profile, we can then go on to explain to you what the likely options could be, right? So for different people, they will likely have different options, right? So, but I know generally when people contact us, from having conversations with them, then I get to realize that most of them, when they ask you what programs do I qualify for, or which one is the easier way to come to Canada, I think that oftentimes they are referring to those programs that are being managed through the express entry system, right? So, and people tend to confuse express entry system with programs, right? So just to be clear, express entry system is not an immigration program on its own, right? There's no immigration pathway that is called express entry. So instead, express entry is just an application system that is used to manage a number of immigration programs. So for example, we have a program like the Federal Skilled Worker Program, and then we have another program, the Canadian Experience Class, and of course, we've got the Federal Skilled Trades Class. So these are different economic immigration programs, right, that are managed through the express entry system. So express entry is just an electronic applications management system, right? So you go in there, you put your profile into the pool, and then, they determine which of these three programs that, they determine which of the programs you qualify for, right? And then you can be considered under any of those three programs, right? Yeah, so to kind of go back to your question again, so what you qualify for as a candidate or an applicant would depend on your profile, right? Your educational qualifications, your age, your work experience, maybe you have a relative in Canada. So there's really no, straight answer to that question, if I may say, right? Answer. Yeah. So it depends on those factors, right? And as I said, because it depends on those factors, I cannot exactly say which one is the easiest way for you to immigrate to Canada.
So basically what I'm hearing is if someone's telling you that there's a particular easy way to get to Canada, you should be looking at that person with one kind eye.
Right? Yeah, well, careful. For sure, right? So for us, we like to, I believe that, like many other professionals, we like to be very honest with our clients in telling them, yeah, you want to immigrate to Canada, come, let's talk, let's have a consultation so that we have a better understanding of your situation or your profile. And based on that understanding, as well as based on our own knowledge and experience with the different immigration programs, we will be able to recommend to you, the most viable option, right, that meets your needs. Yeah.
Okay, so while one is looking at that viable option and exploring whether or not they want to come to Canada, what would you say in your expertise then are the first key things that they need to do before they immigrate to Canada?
Yeah, I would say that for you, before you immigrating to Canada, or if you are considering immigrating to Canada, it's always a good idea to make sure that you are talking to the right people, right? Because of course, we know that Canada is a popular destination for many people around the world, so there are a lot of advertisements and marketing efforts, going on around the world, encouraging people to apply to come to Canada. So we are aware that there are a lot of scammers out there, who will say, yeah, come to Canada, come to us if you want to go to Canada by Christmas, we have different packages for you and things like that, right? So it's important to make sure that you talk to the right person. And it's important for a number of factors, right? Because number one, of course, immigration could be a costly endeavor for a number of people or for many people, right? It is also a very important decision, right? Because you are leaving your country behind. Oftentimes you are leaving your family, the people you've known for all of your lives, you're leaving them behind to come to this new country, right? You're leaving your job and maybe your business and things like that to come into a new country. So it's a very huge decision, right, that you'll be making. So it's always very important to make sure that you do it right. And the first step in that process is make sure that you talk to, the right people, the right professionals who can help you.
Absolutely. And then the follow-up question that I have with that is, like, how much money on average would that cost then?
Well, it depends, right, on the size of your family. And it also depends on the program, right, that you're applying for. So, for example, somebody who, wants to come to Canada to study. So coming to Canada is not really considered immigration, But the fact is that a lot of people who come to Canada to study, they also have a plan to live in Canada permanently, right? Or to immigrate to Canada. So if you want to study in Canada, so you have to think about, how much does it cost to study? What program do you want to study? What school would you like to attend? And how much is that program, right? And then on top of how much the program costs, you also need to think about your living expenses in Canada, right? So are you coming by yourself, or are you married, or you are in a sort of a relationship? So are you coming with your family? So that will also go a long way in determining how much it will cost you, right? So, and if you are immigrating, and let's assume that you are applying under the federal skilled worker category, right? So in that program, so essentially this is a program for professionals, right? So generally you need to have some high level of education, at least a 2-year diploma. Of course, we have a lot of people who have more than that. We have people with a bachelor degree, master's degree, PhD, and all the professional occupations, right? So you have to have that level of education, and also you need to make sure you have the language proficiency required. So if you apply under the federal skilled worker category program, under the federal skilled worker category, you generally need to have at least a language benchmark of level 7, right? So you have to prove that by writing the IELTS exam, or you write the other forms of language exams that are acceptable. And so how much it will cost you will depend on the size of your family. And of course, there's the medical examination that you need to do as well. So the costs, apart from the regular application fees, right? So you have all those additional costs, in some countries, you need to, it may cost a little more than others. So for example, to get police clearance. So all of those also have to be considered, right? And of course, you have to do credential evaluation, because in Canada, as we all know, right? So almost every country has a different educational system. So what Canada has done is, if you want to immigrate to Canada, you'll be required to send your credentials, your academic qualifications, to one of the designated organizations. Right? You send it there, and then they evaluate your credentials, and then they tell you that your bachelor degree from Nigeria or your bachelor degree from India or Kenya is equivalent to a 4-year bachelor degree in Canada. And then you get the points that correspond to a bachelor degree. Yeah, so the federal skilled worker program is based on points, right? So you get points for your education, you get points for your language proficiency, you get points for your work experience, you get points if you have relatives in Canada, or if you studied in Canada at some point, or maybe you worked in Canada at some point. So you get points for all of this, right? So at the end of the day, your points are added together, and then you get the total scores, and then you go into the pool, the express entry pool, right? And then you are ranked alongside the other applicants in that pool. And if you are successful, you get an invite, an invitation to apply for permanent residence in Canada. So while you are completing your express entry profile, you need to answer questions. For example, how many people what is the size of your family? Right? Yeah. And while you are answering that questions, then you also need to answer questions relating to how much funds that you have and that you can bring with you to Canada. Right? So that depends largely on the size of your family and how many people are included in your application. Sorry, that's a longer answer to your question.
Yeah, no, that's okay. So basically, if you don't, so basically money is an issue. So if you don't have the money, your application could be stalled, or you might just want to wait until you have the money, because that sounds like there's a lot of money involved in that process. So with regard to job that you were talking about earlier, how does one then get a job? Because I've had questions where people ask, oh, I want to come to Canada through the skilled work route or through the skilled work stream, but they need a job offer. So how does one go about that?
Yeah, for sure. So if you are in the express entry pool and you have a job offer from a Canadian employer, so that can give you additional points, which can boost your chances of immigrating to Canada. And also, if you have a job offer, a valid job offer, so let's underline that. If you have a valid job offer, that can also enable you to apply for a work permit to come to Canada. So now, yes, I get these questions all the time from so many people. Oh, can you help me get a job offer? Or I got a job offer. I just need the work permit. Can you help me apply for my work permit and things like that, right? So there are a lot of people around the world, unfortunately, who are going about promising people, job offers or selling job offers.
Yeah, I've
right?
heard about that. I've heard about that.
Considering that, for a lot of people who want to immigrate, it's not, it costs a lot of money for them to immigrate. And of course, it's not a very easy decision that they are taking to leave the country, to leave their home countries, right, for Canada, right? So, they have to be careful, when dealing with this issue of job offer, so that you do not invest your scarce resources. For some people, they've been saving up, right, for this project for maybe a number of years or, for many months, right? So if you are not careful, if they are not careful enough, there's the risk that they can lose their savings or their, to all these people who go about selling job offers or promising, job offers. So for a job offer to be valid, generally, especially if you are outside of Canada, right? So there's something we call the labor market impact assessment, right? So essentially what this is that the government of Canada has decided, okay, yeah, Canadian employers or companies, you can hire people from abroad if you cannot find a worker, a suitable person to do the job that you need, to be done. If you can find a suitable person within Canada to do that job, you may be able to hire somebody from abroad to do that. However, there's a process for that, right? So essentially, you have to make sure, you have to convince the federal government, the government of Canada, that I tried to get somebody from Canada to do this job, but I could not find a suitable candidate to do this job. So I need an approval or a permission to go abroad or to look abroad in order to hire somebody, right? So it's not always an easy process, right? Because of course there are some requirements. You'll be required to have advertised the job, for a period of time, and you must have advertised the job on different types of media, right, to make sure that people in Canada have the opportunity to respond to your advertisement, try to apply for these jobs, right? So, and of course, you have to pay some application fee to the federal government, to the government of Canada, to process your LMIA, what we call the LMIA, or the Labor Market Impact Assessment. And then after the federal government has gone through your application, if they approve you, so you get that approval or the authorization to employ somebody, to hire somebody from outside of Canada. And then once you hire that person, the person needs to apply for a work permit in order to come to travel to Canada and do the job, right? So it's not always as easy as some people make it seem, that, oh yeah, you get a job offer, you can come to Canada or things like that, right? So if somebody is promising you a job offer, you need to know, for you to be able to do this job, or for the employer to be able to give you this job offer, would the employer be required to have a labor market impact assessment? If the answer is yes, so did this employer obtain a labor market impact assessment? So if the answer is no, then it's not likely that this is a valid job offer. So you should be careful, right? And also, I mean, nobody should sell you a job, right? So if someone starts to tell you that you need to pay $10,000 or $20,000 in order to get a job in Canada, then you need to think carefully about that. I'm an immigration consultant, but my responsibilities, do not include, job search for potential immigrants or for people looking for a job in Canada. However, if you have a job offer and you need help with applying for a work permit in Canada, we can assist you through that process.
Thank you. And this is a good segue to talk about some of the things that can jeopardize your application. So for those people who are looking to immigrate to Canada or move to Canada for school or for visits or whatever else, what are some of the things that, we should be careful for? You've already mentioned one. So if people are selling you a job offer, you should be thinking twice before you accept. So can you mention other things as well, the core things especially that you've seen in your work?
One of the things that I've seen in recent times is misrepresentation on applications, right? So essentially, when people are not telling the truth, right, about their circumstances when they are applying for a visa or to immigrate to Canada, to travel to Canada or to immigrate to Canada. Yeah. So particularly this is very common for people applying for, visitor visas, people applying to study in Canada. So, everyone should know that Canada shares information with a number of countries, right? Particularly the United States, Australia, and New Zealand, and to some extent the UK, right? So if you have applied for, to travel to these countries, when you do your Canadian visa application, there's always that question asking if you had applied for a visa or if you had been refused a visa to another country before. So if you had been refused a visa to the US, I mean, it's not a crime, right? To have been refused a visa. So you just need to mention or state that, yes, I applied for a visa to the US to visit the US in 2019 and my application was refused. You can just leave it at that. You don't need to provide anything elaborate, right? However, if you do not provide that information, so when you submit your application, Canada is going to check your application against the US database. And of course, that information is going to come out, right? So that could lead to refusal of your application, right? Because that will be considered or could be considered as misrepresentation. And of course, in some cases, it is not always the case that people intended to misrepresent or to lie. Sometimes people actually forget to put such information, about their previous refusal, right? So normally, when the Canadian visa officers are processing your application and they realize there's a situation like that, so normally they contact you and ask you to explain, right, why you omitted, to state this information. So yeah, if that occurred as an omission, you could explain. But if they are not satisfied, they can refuse your application. Not only would they refuse your application, they may give you a 5-year ban. Wow. So which means that you will not be able to apply
for 5 years.
To travel or immigrate to Canada for 5 years. And even after 5 years, I mean, yes, your ban will be lifted after 5 years, but that is always going to be on your file, right? So which may continue to haunt you. So that's one of the common mistakes that people make when they are applying to travel to Canada, either to travel or to immigrate or maybe even to study, right? So that is something people need to pay close attention to. And of course, the other part of that is there's a popular program as well, we call the Provincial Nomination Program, right? So this Provincial Nomination Program, as you know, Canada has 10 provinces and each province has a very different economy, right? So, you go to Ontario, the structure of the Ontario's economy is different than what you have in a province like, Nova Scotia, or you come to the British Columbia and other. So every province has different economy. And the implication of that is that the labor market needs of each economy is different, right? So in Alberta, for example, the labor market dynamics will be different than what you have in British Columbia and,
Absolutely.
and other parts of the country, right? So the provincial nomination program allows each province to be able to select and recruit immigrants, to meet their labor needs, right? So for some of the provinces, for example, in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, so generally, if you're applying for nomination in those places, right, if you have ties to those provinces, for example, if you have a family member who lives in that province, right, so you may get additional points. In Saskatchewan, for example, if you have a family member who lives in that province who has a permanent residence or citizen and has lived in that place for at least 1 year, so you may get additional points, right, which can enable you to meet the requirements for provincial nomination in that province. So one thing I have noticed in recent times is a lot of people, contacting me and asking, oh, I want to immigrate to Saskatchewan, right? Can you help me get a relative in Saskatchewan? So, well, unfortunately, right, I cannot help you to procure a relative in Saskatchewan, right?
Kidding.
So, and I do not advise you to do that because, when people are doing these things, they tend to focus on the immediate, which is to come to Canada, right? But there could be long-lasting consequences, right? For this action. So, for example, even if you succeed in immigrating to Canada, you procure a relative in Saskatchewan.
I like the way you say procure a relative.
That's essentially what it is, right? So you procure for yourself a relative in Saskatchewan, and because of that, you get more points, and then you get provincial nomination, and ultimately you become a permanent resident in Saskatchewan, and then eventually you become a Canadian citizen. If at some point in the future it ever comes out that you obtained your provincial nomination in the province through,
The procured relative.
you can say through procurement or through this,
I gotta use that word,
you
David. I
know,
love it.
or through this kind of way, then of course the government of Canada can revoke your citizenship because it means that everything was built on
On
fraud,
a lie.
right?
Yeah.
And even in Saskatchewan and Manitoba, when they are processing your applications, so they will generally try to verify the nature of your relationship with that resident in the province, or so if along the line they find out, of course they will ban you from participating in their program. Or even if they don't find out at that stage, if you succeed and at some point you become a Canadian citizen, your citizenship can still be revoked, right, for fraud and things like
Absolutely.
that, right? So people have to be very careful, right? So yeah, I do get a lot of questions, a lot of people contacting me about that. Yeah, I have everything. The only thing I need now is just to get a relative in Saskatchewan or Manitoba. Well, I'm sorry, right? If you don't have a relative there, I can't get you a relative, right? So
Yeah.
that is another mistake that people make when they are applying for immigration. And maybe I will also touch on student visas or study permit applications, right? Because that is also very popular. A lot of people are applying for that. So when the visa officers are reviewing a study permit application, they look
Mhm.
for a number of things. So number one, they want to know that you are, actually going to be a student, right? You are not just applying. You are not kind of hiding under student application to immigrate to Canada. Yes, Canada knows that a lot of people, apply to study in Canada and ultimately they want to continue to live in Canada. Myself, I came to Canada as a student and
Mhm.
eventually I went through the process, became a permanent resident and a Canadian citizen, right? So Canada is aware of that, right? So, but when you are applying for visa, you still need to convince them that your student visa application, is not for immigration purpose, right? You are not applying to study in Canada because you want to immigrate. Yes, there may be some instances, right, where you are applying for student visa with the purpose of, with the ultimate goal to immigrate. But in many cases, when they are reviewing your application, you need to convince them that, yes, I am a, bona fide student, right? And in order to prove that, you need to meet a number of requirements, one of which is you need to explain clearly why you want to study in Canada, what you want to study, and why is it that you have to do a study plan, right? So essentially, and the
Yes.
study plan will explain why do you want to study in Canada, what do you want to study in Canada, why are you not undertaking similar program in your country? Is it that these programs are not available in your country, or are there some other important reasons why you think it's better for you to do this program in Canada versus doing it in your country, right? So, and of course, you need to show proof of funds that you have the funds to pay your school fees and living expenses in Canada. So what I am trying to drive at here is that a lot of people, when they do their applications, they do not put enough effort into writing a study plan. And this is very, very important. So if your study plan is not strong and solid enough, it is very likely that your application will be refused. Right. So when applying to study in Canada, pay attention, right, to writing a good study plan. Otherwise, your application may be refused.
Even after you were already accepted by the school.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Well, being
I know
accepted
people
by
that's
the
happened
school
to.
is not, it doesn't mean that your application. It's a separate process. It doesn't mean
Absolutely.
that your application cannot be refused. For sure, you need to get admission into a program at an accredited college or university, and then of course you apply for your visa or your study permit. And so, as part of that study permit application process, they will evaluate your application. Look at, is this person a real student, right? So, and the way you convince them that you are a real student is through your study plan. You have to make sure that the study plan is strong enough. Yeah.
Thank you. Something else that I want you to touch on is with regard to things that can jeopardize your application is people who come here and they claim that you're a relative to somebody, so somebody sponsors them as a spouse or a child or something, but then you're not. This is just some distant relative or friend, and you help that person to come to this part of the world based on false information. So I wondered if you can also touch on that as well, about the repercussion of engaging that kind of fraudulent information. And then there's also the issue about people pulling funds to show proof of financial status. So I'm wondering also with that piece, is there any issue there? So I know that sometimes, because the money that is expected is a lot. So for example, for students, many of them hope that when they get here, they can work and pay for the rest of whatever is owing. So I know that they can't work full time, but they can at least work for a little bit, of hours that can help with your fees. So, but when you're coming, they don't have all that money. And so they borrow this money, reflect it in their bank account, submit your application, and then they give all the money back to whoever, right?
Yeah.
Are there any issues with that kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah. So thanks for that. So to go back to the first question around family sponsorship, right? So yeah, so that is another important way through which people come to Canada, right? So people sponsor their spouses, or, or their dependent relatives, maybe an orphan relative, or something like that. So that happens a lot, right? So, but it's very important to know that, or maybe even through super visa, people, apply for their parents or grandparents to come to Canada, right? So it is important to know that there are implications for you when you undertake to sponsor somebody to come to Canada. So because Canada does not want people to come here, and then end up receiving social assistance, right?
Absolutely. No country wants that, I don't think.
Yeah. So that is why they ask that the sponsor has to make an undertaking, right, for the person that they are sponsoring. So, and, depending on the person you are sponsoring, the undertaking varies in terms of the length, how many years you undertake to support this person, right? So if the person should go and assess social assistance after coming to Canada, while that undertaking is still in place, so the government may come after you, the sponsor, right, to make sure that you pay, right? You reimburse the government for whatever
for that
social
person's
assistance.
Are you serious?
So that's why it is important to make sure that you pay attention to that when you are sponsoring somebody.
Right.
Be careful, make sure that you are doing it with honest intent. Maybe if the person is really a relative, yes, but if you get paid to sponsor somebody or to claim, if somebody is procuring you as a relative, right?
My favorite
so
word.
you
This
should know
podcast
that,
should be totally called procuring a relative.
yeah. So you should know that having that person in Canada is not the end of it all, right? So you may continue to be liable, right, for whatever that person does in terms of seeking social assistance and things like that. So it's very important to make sure that, you know who you are sponsoring and to understand the implications, right, when you are
David,
sponsoring
just
somebody.
before you answer the second part of my question, I just thought of something that I know happened to somebody. So what if you did bring that person with good intentions? So the person, maybe you sponsored them to come here to come visit. They came with very good intentions, but now they don't want to leave. And you're claiming refugee status, and we know that you're not refugee. So what is that sponsor supposed to do now?
Yeah, it depends. So if you just invited somebody to visit, you haven't really sponsored that person, right? So if the person decides to apply or file for refugee, I mean, then you are not really responsible for what that person does, right? So, but if you sponsored or you got your mother or your parent or grandparent to come here on a super visa, right, and then the person then goes and make recourse to social assistance, then that can come back to haunt you, right? Or maybe you even sponsor a spouse, right? I mean, there have been many instances where somebody sponsored a spouse, and then the person gets here, the sponsored person gets here, and the relationship does not work out, and then, they get separated and things like that, so it has implications, even apart from the financial implications, right? So what it means is that if you sponsor somebody and things go bad, you may not be able to sponsor another person for quite a while. Right. So imagine you sponsor somebody, you married somebody, and then you sponsor the person to come to Canada, and then the relationship breaks down. Now you have gone separate ways, and you have fallen in love with another person. So you may have experienced some complications in trying to sponsor another person, right? So so this must be understood. For a lot of people, they coming to Canada, immigrating or coming to study or coming for whatever reason, could be quite expensive, right? And because of that, people pull funds, so maybe they get help from family members, brothers, sisters, or parents, or some.
So that's okay, right? Like that's not a big deal.
I mean, it depends, right? So if you are a student, for example, right, you want to study in Canada. So if your parents can undertake to support your studies in Canada, to fund your studies, that is okay, right? So as long as when you are doing that, you have to be able to prove the relationship, right? So between yourself and the person who is undertaking to sponsor you, and also the person who is also sponsoring you, will have to show this, the source or sources of their income.
Yeah.
Understand? So is it from business? Is it from employment and things like that, right? So yeah, so and of course, one of the ways you show that you need to present bank statements. That's one of the ways you show proof of funds. So of course, if you're letters or confirmation of employment, pay slips and things like that, and if you have some assets, evidence of those assets and things like that, right? Of course, evidence of relationship could be birth certificates. It could be some other documents, to show that this is the relationship, right? But having said that, one of the mistakes that a lot of people make when they're applying for study permit is the fact that maybe a few weeks before the application, then they gathered a lot of money.
That's to gather the money.
Some lump sum amount into their accounts. Right?
Yeah.
So when the visa officers are reviewing these applications, they do go through your bank statement. So if they see that for the last 3 months, you've only been having $100 every 2 weeks in your account, and all of a sudden, you got $100,000, right?
Yeah, it's questionable.
Yeah, so you may have to give some explanation.
Absolutely, similar to buying a house. Like they look through all your records when you're buying a house, and then maybe your income has been, or the incoming funds have been consistent, and then all of a sudden there's like a $20,000 deposit like 2 days before you go to buy the house. So they're gonna ask questions. So it makes sense.
Sorry, just to add, and I've seen some instances too where people had lump sum amount on their bank, on their bank statement, but the money came from another account that they owned, right? Because it's possible for somebody to have multiple bank
accounts with different institutions.
Exactly, right? So, but when you are submitting your application, you have to make sure that you explain that in advance, right? Because the visa officer will surely see that. So if you don't explain that, the officer may not give you an opportunity to explain, because of course you have to bear in mind that these officers, they deal with a lot of applications, and they only have a limited amount of time to spend on your own application. So you have to put yourself in their shoes and make sure that you explain some of these things right up front, right? Because I have a client recently, for example, the application, it was a very strong application, but the application was refused, because of the same issue that we talked about. And then when she contacted me, they refused my application. Then I said, okay, let's look into this, right? So I contacted immigration and I got more information about the refusal. And then one of the things they mentioned there is that, there was lump sum deposit in this account. Right?
Oh, wow.
Unexplained lump sum deposit in this account on this date. Then I called the client. I asked, so how did you come about this money? So she said, oh, yeah, it was just a transfer from one of my accounts to this account. I said, okay. Yeah, and then we explained that and we reapplied again and we're successful, right? So pay attention to that.
I'm wondering if you can share with us anything that has changed to the immigration stream coming to Canada because of COVID.
One thing that most people will notice is the fact that most applications take, way longer than usual, right? So, and this is very frustrating. Particularly, you have some people, who even people who are already in Canada. So maybe they lost their status and now they applied to restore their status. But unfortunately, because of this, backlog of applications that immigration is dealing with, and because since the pandemic, people have been working remotely, and they say that they have been working on reduced capacity. So, which means that they have limited resources to process applications. And in the middle of all these things, too, Afghanistan happened. The situation in Afghanistan.
Yes,
right? So, and Canada committed to bringing, I think, about 40,000 people from Afghanistan. So, bear in mind, when Canada made this commitment, they did not increase their capacity at the same time, right? The capacity in terms of the number of officers processing applications, right? So, what is happening is that Canada has diverted some of the resources, right? Existing resources towards addressing the issues in Afghanistan. So because of that, applications are taking longer than usual. So it's very frustrating, for most applicants, and of course for me as well. It's very frustrating because, I
Yeah,
have to
because your
contact
clients are
them,
frustrated and
yeah. So
everybody's frustrated. But we
yeah,
gotta be patient, guys. These
yeah,
are just difficult times for everybody. So
yeah,
we just
yeah.
have to be patient.
Yeah, and the other part of that is also, I mean, for people who are applying, for those programs managed through the express entry system, right? Like a federal skill worker program or the federal skill trades, right? So those programs, you get points for age, right? So if you were 44, you know, last year, at the,
Oh
when
yeah.
the pandemic was just starting, and because Canada has not really has kind of put that program on hold for a while now because of this of the pandemic, right? So, we have all become, everyone has become a year older since that time, right? Since the
Yeah.
pandemic began. So
Absolutely.
there are some people now who may no longer meet the requirements, or they may not get points for age. Because if you are 45 or 46 and above, you don't get points for age, right? So if you were 44 when you got into the
Well, they
pool,
need
and
to
then
freeze your age. They need to
and
because they need to
and
just freeze
then
the age of the applicants
yeah,
just
and then the pandemic
for this
happened, and
period.
now you are older. So yeah, it's got a lot of implications for
Yeah.
people, for sure. Yeah.
So, what are some realities that people should expect or you would like people to know before they come here?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a great question actually, because people, like I said earlier, so when people decided to come to Canada, it's a huge decision that they are making. Of course, they have to uproot themselves from their home countries, from their friends and families. They are leaving a job behind. So I think I would say that people have to be very realistic, right? When they want to come to Canada, right? So you're coming to a new country, you will have some challenges, right, in terms of integrating into this new country, right? So you may, face some barriers in terms of the job market, because of course, right, just like in every country, in any country, right? So for example, in a place like Nigeria now, if you study law in Canada or maybe in any other
Yeah.
country, and you go to Nigeria, you want to practice law, right? You cannot just start to practice law. You can't just get
Yeah.
into Nigeria and start to practice law. So the Nigerian Bar Association, or the bodies responsible for legal education in Nigeria, they have a process in place, right? So you may have to go to the Nigerian law school and things like that. I know people who went to study medicine, right, in Eastern Europe and some other countries, right, and then they went back to Nigeria. They want to practice in Nigeria. So the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria, they have procedures in place, right?
Yeah.
So you have to write some exams. So the same thing applies for certain professions when you come to Canada, right? So yeah, maybe you're a lawyer in Nigeria or in Ghana or whichever country, and now you want to you are in Canada and you want to practice your profession in Canada. So you might have to go through some processes,
Yeah.
some
So there'll be some
exams, and
learning.
so some sacrifices along the way, right? So being realistic, I think is very important. And also I think being open-minded is also very important, right? Because when you come into a new country, maybe you find yourself in this province. The province has a very different economy. Maybe you may have to change your career. You may have to get some certifications or some form of new education in order to enhance your prospect in the job market and things like that. So being open to that, being flexible, I think is very, very important as well, right? So, and I think also very important is networking, right? Go out there, reach out to people, meet people, because that is how you put, your story out there for people maybe in a position to help you. Because if you're always, in your little corner, nobody knows that you exist, really, right? So
Yeah, if you're in your little
when
corner, nobody knows you.
exactly right.
That's
So
just it.
go out there, meet people, volunteer, participate in different activities in the community, and that is how you get to know people and you integrate better into the society that way, and ultimately, so that would be to your advantage. So those are some of the
Yeah,
things
you
we need to,
thrive.
yeah. So just basically, I don't think anyone should expect that I come to Canada right now within 3 weeks. I start a job in my car in
You'll be
my field,
balling
and
money
all of that.
everywhere,
So yeah,
You'll
yeah.
just
So
be
that is
sending
possible.
containers to Nigeria.
Yeah, I'm not saying that is not possible, but I mean, it is not often the case, right? So
I think
in most
it
cases,
is. I
it
think it's
takes,
for sure not possible, David,
yeah.
to
Well,
be
people
balling
have
in that kind of money in 3 weeks.
yeah, people have different experiences, but just be prepared that it may take
Yeah.
you a little longer, But if you don't give up, I think in the end, right, it's something, worth it.
Absolutely, it's definitely worth it. So I'm closing our conversation now, and want you to share just one key advice that you would like people to take away from today's conversation about immigrating to Canada.
I would say that whoever is considering immigrating to Canada, they need to make sure that they speak with the right people, with the right person. That is very important, right? Because if you find yourself with the wrong people, of course, you can lose your money, and you may not achieve your goal, right? So talk to the right people so that they educate you about the process. And maybe before you even talk to the right person, to do some research, right? So that when you talk to that person, you are able to ask some good questions, right? So that is
Absolutely.
what I would suggest.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
can I add something? So earlier
Of
when I
course.
talked about job offer in Canada, so yes, in many cases you need your employer will need to get labor market impact assessment, LMIA, in order to give you a valid job offer. But there are some cases, very few cases, where the employer may not require a labor market impact assessment. One of such cases is under the caregiver program. So I think in 2019, the government established the caregiver pilot program. It's a 5-year program, right? So essentially, under this program, um, if you are an employer in Canada, you want to hire somebody to come and do caregiving duties for you, for example, to look after kids or to take care of somebody with disability or a senior, right? So you may not necessarily have to get a labor market impact assessment. However, that employer has to demonstrate to the government that he or she has a need for a caregiver, right? So do you have kids who need caregiver, or do you have, parents, seniors or people with disabilities in your home who need caregiving, who need a caregiver, right? So that is one. And then two, you must also demonstrate that you have the means to pay for the services of a caregiver, right? So you have
Yeah.
to show through your income, right? So for example, you have to think about that, right? So if you employ somebody to work as a caregiver in Canada, at the minimum, you have to pay at least you have to pay the minimum wage, right? So if your annual salary is your annual income is $60,000, right?
Yeah.
So can you employ somebody
That
to
you
work for you full
employ
time
full
as a
time.
caregiver? So probably the answer will be no, right?
No.
So yes, you may be
Yeah.
able to hire somebody under the caregiver program, the caregiver pilot program, without a labor market impact assessment, but you must meet other requirements of the program, right? So which includes demonstrating the need for a caregiver and also showing that you have the means to pay a caregiver.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you so much, David. I
yeah,
really
you're welcome.
appreciate our conversation. It's very valuable, and I believe it has tons of information that will support people looking to come over here. Can you now share with us your contact information? Anybody that wants to, get in touch with you, ask more questions, perhaps hire your services, where can they find more information about you?
To reach us, you can, contact us via our website. If you go to our website, it's Crest Immigration Services Canada. So go to our website. You can fill out a form there, and then we'll get in touch with you. You can also send us an email, info@crestimmigration.ca. You can also contact us by phone or via WhatsApp at 587-974-8942. 587-974-8942. Yeah, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much, David. Yeah,
Yeah.
so this has been an amazing conversation. I just want to say thank you so much again for being here with me today.
Yeah, thanks, IJ. Thanks for having me. I enjoyed this conversation, and hopefully your listeners will benefit from this as well.
Absolutely.